In the last 20 years, spying has transformed beyond recognition. From countries casually eavesdropping on each other,
The NSA may have been spying on Chancellor Angela Merkel.
to this.
Hal Weinstein hired private investigative firms to collect damaging information on his accusers.
We were able to get upwards of 50 million plus Facebook records in the span of a couple months.
And how many of those people behind those profiles were aware that their profiles had been used in this way?
Almost none.
How do you defend your country and your enemies?
Our product is used on occasion to kill people.
So, who are these private spies and why do they even exist? After 2001, the US government dramatically expanded its spy operations. But instead of growing the CIA, they outsourced it to private spies. By 2014, over 1 million private contractors now hold security clearances. Since then, these private spies have expanded to work for corporations and billionaires. But why should you care about any of this? Well, here's the most disturbing part. These firms aren't just profiting from conflict, sometimes they even create them. It's a business model built on keeping the world unstable. Look, I used to think that spies saved the world. Now I realize they're the ones secretly shaping it for whoever's willing to pay the most. So here's the real question. Who exactly are these spies for hire and who do they serve? To make sense of it, I mapped out the entire private intelligence world into 4 types. Think of it as like a spectrum. On one axis, who pays them? World governments or private clients. On the other, how visible are they? From open contracts to total secrecy. And as you'll see, the more secret, the more shady. So let's start with the most visible players, what I like to call the contractors. They're not the ones breaking into buildings or blackmailing rivals, but they might even be the most powerful because they're the ones providing the tools to help governments watch, track, and punish at scale. And one name stands above the rest. So remember I was saying how after 9/11 the CIA needed help tracking terrorists? Well, they funded a startup, Palantir.
Palantir data giant.
What started as a counter-terror software soon expanded to the FBI, the NSA, and far beyond. Today, Palantir is worth over $25 billion and calls itself the Pentagon's problem solver.
Our enemies.
We built this chain, the digital chain.
We believe America's a great country and our enemies should suffer.
Yeah, that's their CEO. And look, at least he's honest. Palantir software connects everything from surveillance footage, social media, phone records, and even border crossings. It uses that data to find patterns, helping governments find out who to target and when to strike. Basically, they give governments God mode. But here's why you should care. Palantir isn't bound by the same rules as the NSA. They don't need warrants or oversight, and it's exactly why governments love them. And so does Wall Street. Your digital life, what you say, where you go, who you talk to, can be used to make life and death decisions. And you will never know, because now it's being used for everything. To predict crime in American cities by flagging certain zip codes as high risk, to monitor immigrants that are illegally crossing the border, to guide drone strikes in war, and now increasingly even tracking political protests. They say it's about safety, but what happens with this data is used to label activists as threats, target entire communities, or silently punish anyone who speaks out. In a way, our basic freedoms can now be a security threat.
I don't think in win-lose, I think in domination.
Now, to be fair, not all these firms are as aggressive or have a belief like Palantir's CEO that Silicon Valley should help defend the West. Flashpoint, for example, monitors hacker forums and extremist chat rooms to help prevent attacks. But even the good guys raises big questions because their duty isn't to the public, it's to profit for the shareholders and making their clients happy. And look, I'm a capitalist. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that, but there does raise some questions because firms like Palantir and Flashpoint are quietly now even expanding to private clients. Which brings me to the second quadrant, the corporate fixers. Unlike the contractors, they don't serve governments. They serve banks, corporations, and hedge fund billionaires. It's an estimated £15 billion market where firms like Control Risks and Hacklit charge £800 per hour to essentially conduct corporate espionage. And this is where you really start to understand why on earth these private spies exist when the CIA or MI6 already exists. Unlike the CIA and big corporations, these corporate fixers answer to no one. which allowed them to exploit any legal gray zones. So how exactly do these private spies get intel then? They don't break in, they blend in. They attend conferences, pose as consultants, even run fake job interviews just to get someone talking. Other times they pretend to be investors, journalists, or regulators and social engineer insiders into spilling sensitive info.
I'm just a salesman.
Need insider knowledge about a potential investment? Want dirt on your arch rival or competitor? These firms will deploy ex-MI5 and MI6 officers just for the right price. And with this available talent pool, it's exactly why London has become the perfect hub for corporate spying. Because the UK has weak regulations on private investigators, so it's all technically legal, or at least very hard to prosecute. Man, I guess Kingsman wasn't just a movie. So this is the central point for these known companies. They aren't just selling intel, they're selling a promise that you can predict the future. But more importantly, what they're really selling is deniability. They do the dirty work governments and corporations can't afford to be caught doing, but have the money to pay for someone else to do. It's the same playbook as lobbying. Keep your hands clean while someone else breaks the rules. Legally. But these two types that we covered so far, these are the visible ones. So it's nothing compared to the spies who don't want the attention. And as you'll see, they have good reason for that. So before we get into the next quadrant, let me tell you about a sponsor that not only makes this channel happen, but a big reason why you even clicked on this video. I've told you before how I use Opus Clip to create my short form videos, but I haven't told you yet about their new one-click AI thumbnail generator. Since the image model is already optimized for YouTube thumbnails, all I do is paste in an unlisted or public video link, and what it does is that it extracts key information to automatically generate personalized, high-performing thumbnails. Thumbnails are the most important part of any video, but also one of the most time-consuming to get right. And it's helped me generate multiple thumbnails that I can A/B test for this specific video and revamp a lot of my older videos to fit this new channel direction of following the money and power behind today's issues. So go try it out now for free using this link in the description. Thank you, Opus Clip. But now let's explore the even darker side of this industry, the ones doing the job too dirty for anyone to admit. And I call this third quadrant the mercenaries. And it's the one you need to care about most. And it's because these firms exploit a simple loophole. They operate across borders where laws can't reach them. What's illegal for the CIA now becomes perfectly legal when outsourced to a private firm in another country. These operatives aren't just gathering intel. They're shaping outcomes from court cases, elections, and even the news that you read, all from the shadows. So let's start with the media.
The former Hollywood mogul Harvey Weinstein has been sentenced to 23 years.
To 16 more years in prison for and committing a criminal act.
When Harvey Weinstein was about to be exposed for decades of the horrible acts that he committed, he didn't just hire a PR team. He hired Black Cube, a private spy firm run by ex-Mossad agents, and they ran a full-scale operation.
Harvey, why'd you hire Black Cube?
For days like this.
One of their spies posed as a women's rights activist to befriend actress Rose McGowan, all in an attempt to steal her unpublished memoir and learn what she knew. Others targeted journalists investigating the story, trying to uncover sources, stall publications, and bury the truth.
Black Cube, it's run by some pretty hard bastards.
I wouldn't want to be on the wrong side of them.
So this wasn't just damage control. It was counter-espionage against victims and reporters. And it almost worked until Ronan Farrow blew it open. So when you wonder why some stories never come out, it's not just fear. Sometimes it's private spies getting paid to the story. Like you guys always say in the comments, it's shadow banning in real life. And just how you can quietly bend media narratives, private spies also figured out how to do the same in court. In the 2010s, asbestos manufacturers were being sued for poisoning workers and communities. So one of them hired K2 Intelligence, a New York-based firm, to infiltrate the activists and lawyers trying to ban it. And to do so, he went undercover as a documentary filmmaker. He embedded himself for 4 years, attending meetings, helping run an NGO, all while feeding the intel back to K2. And they went deep. They tracked legal strategies, funding sources, and media plans, allowing the corporation to counter them even before it got to court. If he hadn't been caught, no one would have known the legal process was being sabotaged from the inside. And it wasn't an isolated case. When the mining giant ENRC faced a UK corruption probe, they hired private spies, including Black Cube, to surveillance investigators. It's like what you see in the movies. Trackers were placed on cars, emails were intercepted. A judge later called it inappropriate surveillance, but by then, the damage was done. In other words, the company under investigation was running its own investigation on the investigators. So if you're in a legal fight against a powerful person or company, you won't just be facing lawyers. You could be facing spies. And so if narratives and legal outcomes can be manipulated, you can imagine that probably the most dangerous of them all is what they can do in politics. You've heard of Cambridge Analytica, the firm that scraped data from 50 million Facebook profiles and built psychological voter profiles without consent. But what you may not know is that they didn't just run ads. They ran psychological operations, targeting your fears, your moods, your identity to push you toward a specific vote. Don't just take it from me. Take it from the whistleblowers who later admitted the goal wasn't to inform, it was to manipulate.
This sort of warped perception is infused into the name Cambridge Analytica itself.
Using some of the worst impulses to extract information for very cynical purposes.
It was behavioral warfare dressed up as marketing. But now, the game has evolved. You don't even need humans to socially engineer anymore. A University of Zurich study tested AI bots on the subreddit Change My View, and they created fake personas, read people's comment histories, and tailored responses to exploit their beliefs. The result? The bots were 6 times more likely to change minds than real people. And the users never knew that they were talking to AI until the researchers told the admins after the study was conducted. Now, it's safe to assume that private spy firms are already doing this at scale, using thousands of bots flooding the internet to manipulate voters, shape narratives, and shift elections. You might even see it in the comment of this damn video. So these stories share one truth. What you might think happens through fair trials, open debate, and free press is actually being manipulated by private spies. And with AI, it's being done on a bigger, smarter, and more global scale than ever before. Just like the powerful don't need to break laws anymore by hiring private spies now don't even need to hire people to do the job. That should scare you. Which brings us to the final quadrant, where no AI can replace these people. Because when governments want something done quietly, they need the best of the best. And sometimes, hiring a company's staff with ex-spies isn't enough. So what do they do instead? They poach those who still have access to government secrets. And I call them ghosts. In 2019, Reuters exposed Project Raven, a secret hacking unit in the UAE run by Americans. But they weren't targeting terrorists. They were hacking journalists, human rights activists, and even US citizens critical of the regime. But that's not even the scary part. Many of these hired spies still held top secret US security clearances. But how? Because a US defense contractor, Cyberpoint, which had government approval to work with the UAE on defensive cybersecurity, falsely listed these operatives as working NSA contracts. So on paper, they were still working for America, but in reality, they were running offensive cyber operations for a foreign monarchy. One spy even admitted to hacking a US server and only realizing it after the fact. And this went on for years, and it was legal until 2021 that those 3 spies were charged and fined, but none went to prison. Because at the time, there was no law stopping US spies from working for foreign regimes as long as they didn't target the US directly. And it's a pattern that repeats wherever money, secrecy, and power intersect. Because in the private spying world, whether you serve governments or billionaires, loyalty isn't to a flag or a constitution. It's to whoever signs the biggest check. Which leads us to the most important question that no one's asking. Why is the spy for hire industry booming in what's supposed to be the safest era statistically in history? Because when their entire business model depends on a world that stays dangerous, divided, and afraid, they know exactly how to maximize it. Think about it. What happens if they solve a problem? Their contract ends. But if they find evidence that the threat is growing, their budget doubles. To put simply, if war stops, lives are saved, but revenue is. So guess which story gets told? But the biggest and most disturbing reason for their growing success is what I call intelligence escalation. When Black Cube was caught spying for Harvey Weinstein, the fallout wasn't better protections for victims. It was more corporations hiring counter spies. Because what panic creates is more opportunity. It created a private war. We've seen rival firms hired by opposing sides of a lawsuit run surveillance ops against each other. Every scandal just spins up a brand new market for counter-espionage. So here's the uncomfortable truth. If you profit from conflict, the incentive becomes to help keep it alive. They create an economy where fear is the product, surveillance is the service, and instability is the best environment. But the takeaway isn't about spies and suits or Hollywood drama. It's about an economy of power that has always existed from the revolving door, the gray zone, to manipulated outcomes. And until we recognize this cycle, we'll keep funding the very forces that benefit from keeping our world unstable. This is why you must learn the rules of this game, where your personal life, your beliefs, your safety, and even your democracy is all gonna go to the highest bidder. So like this video, and if you wanna learn more about power, then check out my free newsletter, The Money Trails, where I teach you how power works in today's issues in business, politics, and culture. Or you can watch this video on how the trade war is not about trade, but a fight to who writes the rules for years to come. Click here.